Hello, everyone. Welcome to our sociology class. I am Dr. Dilsora Fozilova, and I am very happy to be here with you in our next lecture. So in today's lecture will be about or on the profound implications of surveillance capitalism on modern society, particularly focusing on deviance and fear. Surveillance capitalism, I have the book, thick book. Surveillance capitalism is a concept developed by Shoshana Zuboff. The author is Shoshana Zuboff. That represents the commodification of personal data through extensive surveillance technologies. This emerging phenomena not only transforms economic practices, but also reshapes social behaviors and power dynamics. Understanding the concept of surveillance capitalism is very important for grasping how our digital age influences notions of deviance and fosters widespread anxieties in our society. So what are we going to do in our lecture today? So in this lecture, we will delve into the mechanisms of surveillance capitalism and how they refine deviant behavior. We will explore how continuous monitoring by corporations and state entities, like all different kinds of state entities, all different kinds of search engines, all different kinds of corporations, normalize surveillance in our time, altering individual behavior and societal norms. This constant observation creates a form of social control. We usually don't think about it or don't notice it, where our activities, which was previously considered private, can be scrutinized and labeled as deviant based on data analysis. We will also examine how automated systems can perpetuate biases leading to stigmatization of certain behaviors and groups. Furthermore, we will discuss the pervasive sense of fear and anxiety generated by surveillance capitalism. The knowledge that we are constantly being watched can lead to significant psychological stress. We will analyze how corporations like Google and others and political entities can manipulate these fears to influence public opinion and behavior. This is used for many, many different things, and we will talk about that throughout our class. It amplifies societal anxieties for profit or control. By understanding these dynamics, we can better appreciate the ethical implications of surveillance capitalism and its impact on modern crime, social control, and broader societal landscape. So there are some of the questions we are going to think through our lecture today. So think about how does surveillance capitalism redefine what is considered deviance and what is considered normal in our modern society. In what ways does the constant monitoring associated with surveillance capitalism contribute to societal fear and anxiety? How do power dynamics in surveillance capitalism perpetuate inequality and social control? What are the ethical implications of using personal data for profit and control? And finally, how can individuals and societies resist and adapt to the pervasive surveillance inherent in surveillance capitalism? So before I start talking about the book and Shoshana's book, I will be sharing my screen with you, and then we can continue this with you. Okay. Here you go. I managed it. The age of surveillance capitalism. So who is Shoshana Zuboff? Shoshana Zuboff is known as the Karl Marx of our time because she kind of takes that framework Karl Marx used to analyze social inequalities and how people being controlled through structures of society in his time. She takes that frame and applies to our world, and both of them talking about capitalism. And Shoshana Zuboff takes that to a next level of considering surveillance capitalism. She is a Harvard-based American scholar, and she wrote quite a few books actually, and one of them, the most known one, is actually Surveillance Capitalism. Her first book, based on her doctoral dissertation, was In the Age of the Smart Machine, The Future of Work and Power. And you can see here again, like she's talking about the work. Labor and work was one of the things Karl Marx talks a lot, and work and power is also the concepts coming from Karl Marx's work. And she reconsiders this stuff through the technology and internet and all this stuff in our time. Her second book is The Support Economy, Why Corporations Are Failing Individuals, and the next episode of Capitalism. And now you can see she's building on the first book to write her second book and publishing her second book in 2002. And she is kind of working on the big idea. First one was like about work and power, the age of smart machine, and then it was about the capitalism, next episode of capitalism, and finally she writes her famous book, The Age of Surveillance Capitalism, The Fight for Human Future at the New Frontier of Power, published 2019. Great book to get a copy and read if you have time. Just kind of helps you to understand what's going on in our society and how can we or should we think about the stuff from the different perspective. She's a brilliant scholar. So what is surveillance capitalism? So we will talk about this in our next couple slides or 3 slides. So surveillance capitalism is a term or concept coined by Shoshana Zuboff, refers to a new economic system that emerged in the early 21st century. So Karl Marx was talking about the economic system in his time. He was talking about bourgeois and proletariat and how these things are working, social inequality and inequality between classes, right? Now she is talking about a new economic system in our time. This system is characterized by the commodification of personal data acquired through surveillance and its subsequent use for profit. So she's saying that our personal data, everything about us, how we think, what we want, our interests, all of this data is used for profit by big companies in the world. So surveillance capitalism is a distributed and largely uncontested, like she's saying that nobody cares about them, new expression of power which constitutes hidden mechanisms of extraction, commodification, and control that threatens core values such as freedom, democracy, and privacy. Now she's getting very serious here. She's saying like, it's not only they're taking from you to kind of direct you towards buying something, it also controlling your freedom, taking your freedom away from you, and also threatening the very important values in our time, which is democracy and privacy. She says it is a market actually Holloway is saying that, another scholar, it is a market-driven process where the commodity for sale is your personal data, and other people are making money out of it. And the capture and production of this data relies on mass surveillance of the internet. So now Zuboff is saying that. Zuboff is saying surveillance capitalism was pioneered at Google and later Facebook. So big corporations like Google and Facebook is the fathers or creators of surveillance capitalism in much the system, much the same way that mass production and managerial capitalism were pioneered at Ford. Now we're talking about in the start of industrialization, the Ford and GM was using this managerial capitalism where each person does one thing to bring the cost of the cars, for example, down, and also it is just a very mechanical work, and everything is calculated to increase profit and effectiveness at work, and has now become the dominant form of information capitalism. So what happened in the beginning of industrialization, she's saying, now it's just repeating itself in our time in a different form. Then that managerial capitalism started by Ford and GM, in our time, surveillance capitalism pioneered at Google and Facebook. So what is surveillance capitalism as a book, and what does it talk about? Shoshana Zuboff, the main focus of her book is about data extraction and analysis. And that's not as simple as data extraction and analysis. She talks about not what we share, for example, on Facebook. For example, you send all this update, all this pictures of your birthday or your children's birthday on Facebook, and not the information you are trying to, share with people you love and your friends, but internet's taking some other kinds of data from you. For example, when is your birthday, and what are your interests, and what kind of birthdays do you celebrate, and the facial expressions you have. All this data is used for some other purposes through this surveillance capitalism. And she calls it behavioral surplus. Why behavioral surplus? Because all this information from your face and eyes and all this mimics you make with your face is used to recognize certain people. And she talks about this is being sold to China, and China using this for example, recognizing certain faces. And I honestly, I don't understand how this surveillance, all this data extracted from our face and eyes and all this stuff, how they are used. But that's her claim here or argument here. Also, that is used for prediction of products. For example, if you are looking for something, for example, you want dinner and you have a taste for, let's say, noodles, or let's say Chinese food, or let's say Italian pasta, right? And you're searching, and it right away in that moment, what you want is sent through this channels of information, and all of a sudden you will be seeing these coupons for going certain Italian restaurant or Chinese restaurant to get your food. So in the that moment when you look for something, the information you put there and more taken from you and channeled through, the certain restaurants or certain places to direct you somewhere. Somehow it is kind of helping you to find the food you want. And some people say like, oh, I don't mind this. I just actually like personalized services, and it's easier to find stuff. And Zuboff argues like you're not understanding. You just think that information you provided taken from you and you got what you want, but it's not. It is just the information stolen from you to use all different kinds of different purposes, right? Also, a market for behavioral products. For example, if you are looking for something in internet and that the data analysis shows that people who look for this thing might be also interested with some other stuff, and then it brings your way to make your wishes fuller or directs your interests in certain areas. Or if you buy this, you also need to buy this. And, that kind of like predicts a lot of stuff. And there is a conversation, she talks about the internet getting to know that a woman was pregnant even before she got to know that. She started to buy products without smell. And then, because based on that behavioral surplus information they have, that it predicted that woman must be pregnant because she always used products with certain smells. Now she wasn't liking that smell, and then they started to send um, all these kinds of advertising for baby products or pregnancy products. And then only then she figured it out that she was pregnant. So let's get into that. First, Zuboff walks us through the recent history of US tech companies. So she starts her book by discussing this dot-com bust that traumatized the industry. She talks about the Apple becoming a thing in our time, and then there is like, I mean, when she talks about these companies, she is examining everything, their history and how they started and what they were doing, what was their products and how they were achieving everything they were doing. For example, Apple products, as you know, that one of the most favorable products in our time, right? And how they built that. This is because they were getting this endless information about what people like and what people don't like and what people prefer and what people don't really care about certain products. The surveillance, favorable environment created by the National Security Agency. So she also talks about this surveillance, the main thing. I just forgot what was the original name of it. That was created by NSA, and that was bought by Google, actually CIA, CIA, and that was bought by Google and then used for different purposes. That's supposed to be used for recognizing certain features and the transaction of money to understand the terrorism related stuff. But then it starts to be used for different purposes. So the Shoshana Zuboff argues that all these factors steering us away from both an egalitarian information workplace and the libertarian dream of cyberspace frontier. So this corporations or big businesses basically started to work with our data, our interests and needs and other stuff, and this surplus of information was used for profit, or used for these companies to build their empire with our information. So what are some of the arguments of Shoshana Zuboff in this book? So she says how this kind of surveillance capitalism emerged. She says the rise of new form of capitalism called surveillance capitalism, where corporations profit by collecting vast amounts of personal data from individuals and using it for targeted advertising and behavioral production. So surveillance capitalism is a new economic system characterized by extraction, commodification, and control of personal data for the purpose of predictive behavioral analysis and targeted advertising. So in our time, she's saying that everything is about our information or behavior. For example, if one of you are looking for transferring your studies to, let's say, University of Toronto, or you are applying for jobs in Toronto, and there is a prediction from what you're looking for that you might be interested with other stuff too. For example, you might be interested with rents. You might be interested with or buying house. And depending on how much information you're giving while you're searching jobs, or maybe you are connecting with some people in Toronto, and all this information gathered from you to send very personal advertisings on your way. For example, if you are looking for home, let's say sometimes you're looking for rents, and maybe you're also taking a look at the houses in Toronto. That signals that you might be interested, you might be a potential customer for housing, and which also needs furniture, which also needs television, which also needs maybe some other stuff, right? So all of them is just coming on your way because they can predict from your behavior what comes next. Like they predicted, pregnancy of the woman who did not know herself that she was pregnant, right? So all this data gathered from you is added to this surplus information. There is another millions of people's information who did what when they were looking for same thing. If somebody was looking for home in Toronto, that they also looked for work, maybe they looked for a university studies, maybe they looked for some other things, the furniture, and maybe connected with internet and the utilities and everything. So they now know if you are interested with that, you will be interested with other things that other 1,000 people or 1 million people will interested. So from that, they are sending advertising on your way while they are again getting your information for future use, that what other things other people who are looking home in Toronto maybe will be interested. Yeah, this is kind of like a very like a brain trick kind of conversation. So she talks about this instrumentarian power, which refers to the unprecedented ability of surveillance capitalists to shape and modify human behavior and choices through their surveillance and data analysis techniques. So basically, she's saying like the information gathered from you is added to this pool of information that gathered from other people that matches your behavior. By doing that, the surplus information is creating a very strong and defined way of providing you some services and other things. And because they're predicting your behavior based on the other information they gathered from other people, it kind of like just it's scary because you are now analyzed through the behavior of other millions of people. And probably there is a match because people are similar. Doesn't matter how different you like to be. If you're moving somewhere, you need shelter, you need clothes, you need somewhere to work, and perhaps you need furniture, perhaps you need those kind of stuff. So that's how she says this is an instrumentarian power used by the surveillance capitalism. Through their collection and analysis of personal data, companies are able to construct detailed profiles of individuals, predict their actions, and manipulate their choices, thereby exerting a new form of power over people's lives. Now, you need to understand that it's not only about getting some information from you and sending some advertising on your way. Now, she's very deep with her understanding of this. She's saying like, no, no, no. They are getting your information to recognize all these behaviors, the people similar to you, how they behaved before, and they will know how you are going to behave in the future. And it's almost scary because you don't know yourself what you want, but they do. So they know what's your next step, but you don't, because you did not gather information about people similar to you and how they have done their lives. But they did. That's why they know everything you might do. So by doing so, she says this is a threat to privacy and autonomy of individual. The erosion of privacy and individual autonomy as a consequence of surveillance capitalism is a big deal for her. The constant surveillance and data extraction undermine people's ability to make independent decisions. Now, you might say, okay, well, that is, extracting information from my behavior and predicting everything about my future based on the information gathered from other people. But I still have my choices. I still can decide for myself. And you are right, because you can act differently and go ahead and don't do your usual stuff and do something different. But the thing is, she's saying some other people did that too. So some people did not follow their usual patterns and went and did some other things. And also doing that is in their information pool. So if you're not doing you're not going with your pattern, so what you can do is also predicted by them. So when you are making choices between this, so many choices they know you have, and they are sending all this information on your way to influence you. They know your, if you're experiencing, for example, if you're stressed, or if you are going through certain hardships, or if you are looking for a date. There is a conversation in the book about that. Says, for example, if somebody is lonely and maybe they are looking for date dating websites and stuff. So they kind of like send a personalized information saying like, if you, for example, if you buy this leather jacket and it's very, let's say they find the words to get your attention. That's, gets you somewhere romantic or somewhere you will experience incredible whatever. So by doing that, they are getting into your emotions to influence what you want, and by doing so they are kind of controlling what you can do, which she keeps saying that is very dangerous. And she does not only talk about products, for example, influencing you to get, for example, car or home or clothes or book or anything. That's what they do, or food or anything. But she's also saying this is very dangerous for democracy because they know all this information about you. They can also influence your ability to think about democracy or your choices for in the next election, or they will kind of gather information and modify how this certain kinds of individual or politician is represented in media. So which will be getting to you because you are maybe saying that you're looking for certain things. By gathering that data, they will represent that person being exactly the choice you want. So that is kind of breaching democratic values by modifying or studying your information and then misrepresenting or representing the person the way most people are looking for. The accumulation of vast amounts of personal data by a few powerful corporations creates an asymmetry of knowledge and power, which can influence political processes, manipulate public opinion, and undermine the democratic ideals of transparency, accountability, and informed consent. And Michel Foucault talks about knowledge being or information being power. So that's a knowledge power concept is, it's not something new, right? She uses that saying like, all this information is gathered by you is some other people's power. More information they gather from you, they can use it for their advantage and influence you, and when this influences towards um, political processes or um, democratic processes, when they manipulate public opinion, can undermine these processes, and this is really really dangerous for society, she says. And part of her book she talks about how to resist this. And who can give up their iPhone? If even I lecture you all about this and say, your phone is listening or your Google is getting all the information you want, and if I say, for example, GPS in your car is kind of tracking where you go, and all of this stuff, I can give you all this information, but you will not stop using your smartphone, right? And she talks about this. She says, we need to take this very seriously. She says, the importance of resisting and challenging the encroachment of surveillance capitalism is very important. She gives some potential solutions, such as redefining data rights, establishing new regulations, and promoting alternative economic models. And all of them sounds good, but it's just very hard to do because, you know, um, these companies use this information to do some helpful stuff for us. And yes, they use this information for their profit as well. She then advocates for protection of individual privacy rights, the implementation of data regulations, and development of alternative models, right? So there's the challenge comes with that. Like, for example, if you buy a product, if you want to buy a cell phone, there is like a 12 pages of all this stuff you need to read to write I agree, but nobody reads them because they are written in a very small letters and it's so long. People don't have time to go through every each of them, and the language used for it is like, I mean, it hurts my brain sometimes. So you will not read this 12 pages of the terms and conditions to sign somewhere or agree somewhere, right? So that just kind of makes these processes challenging. And she talks all about this. It says this is done with purpose. Why it's the way it is? Because they don't want you to read those terms and conditions. They don't want you to understand what is coming with that. Nobody reads that, she says. The ethical and social implications of surveillance capitalism, including the exploitation, I can't speak English today, of personal data, the potential for discrimination and inequality, and the loss of human agency and decision-making processes. So then she talks about the commodification of human experience not only leads to the exploitation of individuals' personal data, but also diminishes the richness and authentics of our experiences. Authenticity of human life, she says, reducing it to mere economic transactions. So there is one story I remember in the book was I thought that was kind of interesting. She talks about this person who wanted to propose to his girlfriend, and this is one of the celebrities in the USA, and he buys in his work trip, he buys a diamond ring, and the thing was, um, that would be a surprise uh, proposal to his girlfriend. But before he got back to wherever he was, all this information spread through internet, that what kind of diamond he bought and what he is trying to do and everything. So that ruined the whole spontaneous nature or spontaneous engagement that should have been. So that is kind of interesting thing, and we all almost don't think about that. So she also talks about this Pokemon Go. She says before Pokemon Go, there was a lot of information extraction through Google and other things. And she says Pokemon Go was something that took the internet experience to to society. Now people were walking on the street, and this Pokemon Go was directing where they should go. And all these companies like McDonald's and other places were paying these people who brings customers to them, that people, cheerful people who are going after Pokemon Go. And she says that Pokemon Go was a worldwide experiment using remote control means to control, engineer behavior, and fulfill capitalist tendencies while the player having great time. So all these people are live, they are outside, they are having fun, they are enjoying themselves, yet they are being controlled and manipulated by Pokemon Go to take them to certain places. And I found this pictures through internet. Actually, it says Pokemons are for paying customers only. If you enter to McDonald's looking for your Pokemon, you have to buy something to get your Pokemon. That's the whole idea behind it. She says Pokemon Go is a little Google developed game on top of the big game. So a little game created or developed on top of the big game precisely emulates the logic of surveillance capitalism. Then that is one chapter. She writes whole this chapter about this Pokemon Go. And then the next chapter is about democracy, how that's threatened by this surveillance capitalism. And then she talks about this thing happened to the whistleblower, Christopher Wiley, that he worked Cambridge Analytical scandal. He worked in the Cambridge Analytica. And then since Christopher Wiley blew the whistle in the observer, development have been rapid. Here is what we know about the analytics firm, Facebook, and Trump's election theme. So this, if you remember, if you know anything about this, talks about how this information extraction was used in the election to control and manipulate people's behavior towards elections. And, people use a certain kind of search engines and all of those stuff, and that data is gathered from them, analyzed, and made predictions, and then they created certain kind of information to targeting these people, targeting inner demons and fears and vulnerability of these people, creating this paranoia, basically to lead them towards certain kind of people who are representing a political party or something. For example, if Trump is about building a wall and protecting America from immigrants, and this targeted fears and vulnerabilities talk about what kind of let's say social ill and drugs and other things coming to America through Mexico. I'm just giving just example, coming from Mexico, and how dangerous that is for people's children and what kind of things are happening. Or it talks about certain immigrants being um, targeting certain groups, or there is all this kinds of assaults and abuses and violence and other things, which triggers emotions, and then people respond to it because of these emotions. Then they like Trump and his policies towards building a wall and not allowing other people, because now they are scared or feared of all these things can happen in society. So by learning what people fear from or what are their vulnerabilities, the information created and sent towards their way influence their political decisions. So by doing so, this surveillance capitalism manipulates politics or manipulates people's political decisions. which for Shoshana Zuboff is very dangerous for democracy. She says, unlike industrial capitalism, which profits from exploiting natural resources and labor, surveillance capitalism profits from the capture, rendering, and analysis of behavioral data through instrumentarian methods that are designed to cultivate radical indifference, a form of observation without witness. So, how this surveillance capitalism connected with the deviant behavior in our time. So, behavioral data gathered from people also can be used to stigmatize certain groups, or more than that, normalizing surveillance. For example, as I mentioned earlier, if I say, oh, all this data is gathered from you to do all this kinds of stuff, and you will like, well, that's what it is. So this idea of surveillance and you being watched, your privacy is breached, and everything is manipulated and controlled by certain capitalist corporations becoming normalized in society. And she also says that it has huge ethical and social implications. All this information is gathered from you without your consent. That is a concern for privacy. And it leads to bias and discrimination based on what have you provided and what they find from you or get the information from you, that is compared to the other people's information gathered from other people, and then there is a match, and you might be getting biased and discriminatory views based on what you have put out there. So there is a danger of this surveillance capitalism when it comes to ethical concerns and social implications. She also talks about the social control mechanisms and how this used for policing and profiling certain groups. For example, when you go to airport, all of a sudden, like people with beards are pulled out for extra checkup, or if people are wearing hijab or something like that, or certain kind of look, certain kinds of outfits, certain kinds of behavior can lead to be watched more or profiling, which is for I think not only for Shoshana Zuboff, there is a lot of conversation between scholars about that. That is a huge issue in our time. So, what kind of fears we experience um, through this surveillance capitalism? So, people in our time live with fears of invasion of privacy. And most of the time, we fear if our credit cards are being used or somebody is stealing our identity, and it's used somewhere that damages our, let's say, our reputation, or it kind of endangers our wealth, or it endangers our work. All those kind of stuff that people live with fears and anxieties of invasion of privacy, loss of control over all this information. Sometimes I think, so much, we buy stuff through internet, and we pay for our bills and stuff through internet, and how much of this data we don't want to share is being shared and we don't know, right? And also there's a behavioral manipulation, and then we kind of lose trust towards certain the apps, and overall we lost trust in our society. And it just adds to our isolation, threat to democracy, economic insecurity. All of these are fears and anxieties created in the context of surveillance capitalism. She says surveillance capitalism creates an environment where the pervasive collection and use of personal data foster a range of social fears and anxieties. By understanding these dynamics, individuals and policymakers can better address the psychological and societal impacts of living in a world where surveillance is a central feature of economic and social life. So she's calling for better enhancement of privacy protection, increase transparency, and ensure ethical data. And she talks a lot actually about these corporations hiding their intentions to gather data. And she says when some people or some groups take these people to court, they delay this process as long as they can. Maybe they end up just throwing that case somewhere, or if they found guilty of something, they will just promise to stop doing that, and then they will create the next generation of the same thing, and they will keep gathering your data. So this is our lecture for today, and we discussed about The Age of Surveillance Capitalism by Shoshana Zuboff, and we talked about the main arguments, how this contributes to the anxieties and fears in our society, and how that examines or gets information about our features and behavior, and adds to this information surplus to create predictions about our future. I hope you guys like this book, and you will find some well to grab a copy and read. If that happens, I'll be very happy. If you have any questions, please bring to our discussion platform on the Blackboard, or you can email me and I'll be very happy to assist you. I hope you have a great day. I'll see you or talk to you in our next lecture.